Tantalus Entertainment presents the Killer Score Podcast.
Hello, welcome back to Killer Score for the final episode of 2022's Musical March, and it is my time to shine this month. I am, of course, your host, Daulton Morrison, and welcome to Killer Score, the podcast that covers cult classic films with phenomenal soundtracks that me and my co-hosts believe deserve more attention. You can find me outside of the podcast on Twitter and YouTube under the handle Sick Jacket Man. Content coming up very soon to my YouTube channel. I cover all sorts of things on there: music, movies, video games, some voice acting demo stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna pass it off before we get into this movie to my co-hosts. Here we go.
Howdy, howdy, Richard Eckert, Richard's Rad Voices, Tantalus Entertainment, creator of comic dubs, voice acting demos, covers, and much, much more on the way, courtesy of yours truly and my dear friends at Tantalus Entertainment and Royal Flush Productions. More content coming soon, but until then, be sure to check out recent stuff like the Outsiders Volume 3 comic dub and the Tuesday special I released last month. Pushing that.
Hi, Erin Murray here. You can find me at... almost forgot my own Twitter handle. Nair Murray on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me on my website, witchandcrafts.com. We also have a new Instagram for Witch and Crafts. Ooh. It's just witchandcrafts.nj. More photos and all that fun stuff to come. Yeah, that's all I got going on.
All right. So, I have decided to finally bust out a film that honestly was one of the biggest inspirations for my idea of starting this podcast. I am, of course, talking about the cult classic film True Stories, which is written by, directed by, featuring acting from David Byrne, as well as music composed by him and the Talking Heads, and he did a bit of writing for the film as well, although he was he did have a couple co-writers who helped him make the film. Released in 1986, and it was kind of buried at the time. Warner Brothers had actually put out another music-based film, which was known as, which is known as Round Midnight, which featured music from Herbie Hancock.
Yes.
And it kind of got buried a little bit because it came out shortly after The Color of Money, and the same day as Jumpin' Jack Flash and Peggy Sue Got Married, which were huge box office successes.
One of which is better than the other, but both of which actually have really good soundtracks in their own right. And when Daulton ran this by me in DMs, I was fairly excited because one of many things we share between the three of us is a love of the Talking Heads.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, my phone just went off.
We didn't pick it up.
Oh, it didn't pick up? Cool. So yeah, I know next to nothing about this movie besides reading the back of the box earlier this morning. All I know is that John Goodman's in it, and it was not a Talking Heads project. Just something David Byrne was working on, but not related to the Talking Heads. And yeah, I took a look at the liner notes, I guess you would call them. I'm sorry, I'm a music nerd. On the inside of the Criterion box, and it looks kind of cool because if you get the Criterion one, there's a little newspaper inside there. But yeah, I know next to nothing about this film.
Yeah.
But I am very excited to see it.
So this film really got off the ground because of the surprise success of the few years earlier release of the Stop Making Sense concert film, which, if any of you haven't seen that and you're slightly interested, go see it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it did phenomenally at the box office, and some screenwriters were visiting David Byrne and noticed that his room was plastered with a bunch of newspaper articles from tabloids about weird stuff. And that's when David Byrne came up pitched them the idea of and I just kept thinking to myself, what if all of these kind of stories took place in the same town? His co-screenwriters then pitched him the idea of, well, what if we set it in Texas, because the sesquicentennial is coming up for Texas, and which was the 150th anniversary of the state. And they were like, we could do a Southern film with a bunch of Americana iconography, and what's better than Texas for that?
Western imagery and Talking Heads music? It's like my birthday when it's not even my birthday.
So, yeah, Rich, why don't you read off the back of the box so people know what the plot's about for us?
Certainly. Music icon David Byrne was inspired by tabloid headlines to make his sole foray into feature film directing. An ode to the extraordinariness of ordinary American life and the distillation of what was in his own idiosyncratic mind. The Talking Heads frontman plays a visitor to Virgil, Texas, who introduces us to the citizens of the town during preparations for the celebration of specialness. As shot by cinematographer Ed Lachman, Texas becomes a hyper-realistic late capitalist landscape of endless vistas, shopping malls, and prefab metal buildings. In True Stories, Byrne uses his songs to stitch together pop iconography, voodoo rituals, and a single variety show, all in the service of uncovering the rich mysteries that lurk under the surface of everyday experience. Mm-hmm. Sorry, that was flubtastic.
That's all right. So yeah, it's not exactly a film that is specifically driven by a insular plot. It's got a bit of a backdrop for what's going on, but it's much more of an ensemble piece. We go in and out of the various lives of people around the town, while David Byrne, as the visiting town narrator, talks about the town and all the stuff going on.
Kind of strikes me as an almost Pulp Fiction-y series of vignettes by the way you're talking about it.
Yeah, that's a fair take. The closest thing the film has to a central protagonist is John Goodman's character, as he features in a lot of the scenes, and he has the biggest character arc. In fact, Criterion probably recognized that, and the fact that he's become much more popular over the years, because for the re-release, he is actually featured as the person on the box art. Whereas originally, it was just a poster featuring David Byrne reading a newspaper.
That's boring.
Yeah.
Someone called Drew Struzan to recreate that masterpiece.
Yeah. And probably not helping this film's stuff is October is a month when people tend to also go see horror movies. A few horror movies came out that month. A Wes Craven one came out, Deadly Friend, which underperformed at the box office, but people were still probably going to see that, or Trick or Treat, the rock and roll horror film featuring Gene Simmons and...
Not to be confused with the Canadian one from several years after.
Yeah, from many years after.
Many decades.
Yeah, decades after. Featuring, that, and the Trick or Treat from the 80s featured Gene Simmons and Ozzy Osbourne, which probably drew away attention at the time because Ozzy and Gene were doing pretty well at the time.
Still kind of on fire for musicians of their age.
Yeah, and the other issue was the Talking Heads weren't quite as popular at this point as they were a few years earlier. This came out about 2 or 3 years after Stop Making Sense did. They were still pretty popular on the MTV circuits, but the thing with the Talking Heads is they've always kind of been the artsy kids band and the band for geeks,
Yeah, they actually, several of them, I believe Tina Weymouth and David Byrne among them, had degrees in communication, I believe.
I believe so, yeah.
And that sort of cemented them as very much the music and media nerds musicians. It's like they were small, but they did have a niche.
This is gonna be an odd comparison, To be honest, I feel like the people who were into the Talking Heads back in the 70s and the 80s, their kids now listen to Radiohead.
Funny you should mention that.
Oh boy.
So, part of the reason I also brought this film up is because, obviously everything's composed by the Talking Heads. However, they do not perform almost anything in this film except for one sequence, which is just straight up basically a music video that was shoved in there by mandate. And one of the songs that features at the Celebration of Specialness is a song based off the weird psychic signals that one of the writers said that he would receive when he was in college.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Tobolowsky, one of the screenwriters, relayed that in college he had psychic experiences, which led to a character named Ramon's abilities, which is mentioned in a song performed at the celebration named Radiohead.
Yep.
This is where the band got their name from.
Look at you, Erin, kicking that off. Nicely done.
She didn't even intend to, I could tell.
Yeah, because the thing with Radiohead, Tom York and Johnny Greenwood, all the people that are in Radiohead. Hi, Philip Selway, you're awesome, very nice man. They're big Talking Heads fans.
That checks out.
That checks out, yeah. And of course they were very much, even though they were probably teenagers at the time, they were very much into like the avant-garde kind of art music scene back in the day.
Yeah.
Which checks out.
Mm-hmm.
And as alluded to earlier, Talking Heads are critical darlings, obviously,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. They're super eclectic, they're weird in a still very approachable sort of way.
Inventive. They constantly give attention to other musical genres from outside of like the typical American norms.
You got new wave, you got funk, you've got electro pop, you've got all sorts of things coming out of the Talking Heads, but
You
much
got David Byrne sweating and dancing.
Yeah, they were one of the few heavily white. They were one of the few white bands to have a pretty big black fan base in the 80s.
Yep. In no small part due to their collaborations with actual black musicians.
Yeah, look at the Stop Making Sense concert film and also their love of funk.
Yes, especially their love of funk. Go ahead and look back at their earlier stuff and some of the stuff that Tina Weymouth would end up doing with Tom Tom Club, and you'll see that love. But they were very much kind of trapped by what I call the Devo curse of being seen as something of a technically competent novelty act.
Yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, no. So before we get into this, I just wanted to say that if anyone's interested in seeing this film, it's kind of hard to watch. You can rent it on several platforms online. I believe it's streaming on Criterion Channel, as it is part of the Criterion Collection. So if you have a Criterion Channel, you can probably watch this film. Other than that, you will have to buy the Blu-ray, because the VHS is obviously long out of print, and obviously the Laserdisc is long out of print, and so is the DVD. This film was very hard to come by for years until it was re-released a few years ago.
And I'm glad that you had a copy here, Daulton, because, like, everything you've said about this, which has been vague because, you know, presentation, it still had me excited, though. I'm a big fan of the Talking Heads, and I can only imagine what kind of cinematic techniques will come from David Byrne's end. Guy's a mad genius.
Yeah, it's very pop, it's very Kish, it's very Americana. Almost gives me like tinges of like some of like the later 80s output of John Waters, you know.
Yeah,
like Hairspray and Crybaby especially.
Yes.
Oh, there was one more thing I wanted to mention when we were talking about how this is kind of like an ensemble piece.
Mm-hmm.
If you're into ensemble piece films, there's a movie. I can't even say who it's by because each scene is both done by a different director.
Mm-hmm.
Paris Je t'aime, which is a French film. and each like little vignette is a different director and completely different story, and it's a really cute movie.
Cool.
Sorry.
All right. No, it's fine. So we're going to get right into this and look at the cult eclectic film True Stories. All right, we are back, and let me say, this was my second time viewing this, and I actually liked it even more the second time around. This movie has a way of just like bleeding into you. I loved it. We're back from our viewing of course, True Stories, David Byrne's sole film directorial work. He went on to do some other stuff after this besides Talking Heads music. He actually has a Broadway production out right now called American Utopia. And let me tell you, seeing this makes me want to like see that, because wow, this film has aged tremendously well. The restoration work was phenomenal. This film looks gorgeous.
Oh, yes, it does. When we turned it on, I was convinced momentarily that we were watching something closer to the mid-90s in terms of cinematic crispness.
Yeah.
But,
Oh,
yeah, keep going, Daulton.
Yeah, no. True Stories, 1986. This film kind of got buried, as I mentioned. Unrightfully so. All sorts of studio problems as well. The Talking Heads were forced to like insert a literal music video into this movie that is wildly out of place.
It is.
And it's probably the weakest part of the entire film.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but like it's a good song, don't get me wrong. It just feels out of place because like basically every song in this movie is performed by the cast with the exception of that and Wild Wild Life. But even then, that's lip synced at a club. So it feels cool, especially due to all the changing views and stuff of like people. This movie just is drenched in mood and atmosphere and
culture.
Yeah, and it's just a fantastic ensemble piece. The closest thing to a protagonist is probably Lewis, John Goodman's character, because he has like an arc over the course of the film. Yeah, and he's in most scenes in the movie, but like it's an ensemble piece through and through. So, yeah, it got butchered by the studios in some regards, which was when the film came out, the soundtrack album only featured the Talking Heads performing all the songs.
Boo.
Boo. Throughout the years, bits of the soundtrack were put on other albums, and it wasn't until the Criterion re-release that the full soundtrack was finally released, including the cast performances. And thank God for that, because there's so much gold that is missed out on.
Again, I like the Talking Heads, but it's
this movie is made with the idea of other people performing the songs.
Their songs. Yeah. And I will get to gushing about that in just a moment, but the long story short of it all is that I went from vaguely vibing with this movie to absolutely loving it by the end.
It grows on you. It grows on you.
It's a great little slice of life anthology sort of piece. It's got great music ranging the full spectrum from new wave to rock to country
to
gospel, blues, country, salsa, Latin polka.
Yeah, like a Latin polka number.
Yeah.
And I love every single minute of it. I love the feel-good sort of atmosphere that it goes for. And it's got this satirical edge to it.
Yeah.
That isn't...
It's really good.
That isn't too pervasively cynical like, say, something from a Grand Theft Auto game or something.
Yeah.
Well, also, it does have, I would say, almost like a subliminal message.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as they mentioned on the back of the box, it's like a criticism of like capitalism.
Yeah.
But it doesn't beat you over the head with it like a lot of movies do when they try to put out a message like that.
Yeah, and like it doesn't critique like the little guys in the movie. Like it has a very good opinion of like the general public. It's just that the rich people are shown to be out of touch, like idiots, you know?
Case in point, the woman who literally cannot get out of her own bed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not for any medical reason, as they state in the film. She's just too rich and lazy to get out of bed.
Yeah. And, you know, like the people who run Vericorp in the town, like, you know, someone has a terrible accident at a fashion show run by the wife of like Vericorp's owner, and she's like, "Oh, there's a little accident."
God, I wish the days where that wasn't a everyday report.
And the CEO is a rambling idiot who just goes on and on and on, and like he's saying stuff that sounds like it's substantial, but it's not.
It's fluff.
Yeah,
It's jargon.
it's jargon and fluff.
In other words, it's Zack Snyder's script for Batman v Superman.
Oof. So, yeah. Overall, I want to hear what you guys think about them. What was your first initial impressions? We'll start with you, Rich.
Oh, wow. Erin, I'm sorry, we're gonna be here for a little bit.
It's fine.
That's fine. I
It's
brought
fine.
this movie to the attention of you guys because I want to hear your thoughts.
So, I was expecting a lot of things from this. A quirky, sort of off-kilter cinematic style, which this movie very much does have, from the Terry Gilliam-esque
Yeah, we were
tracking
saying,
shots.
it feels like Wes Anderson before, like, Wes Anderson.
It feels between Terry Gilliam and Wes Anderson, because you get the lighting and the style of Wes Anderson, but also things like tracking shots, which, as Richie mentioned, reminded him of Brazil.
And
Yes.
the overall, like, quirkiness and just, like, the quirky wholesomeness feels very Wes Anderson.
Very Wes Anderson. But it also, like I said, doesn't have too much of that underlying edge. It's there, but it's not poking you in the back of the head with its cynicism.
No.
So I was vaguely expecting all of that because David Byrne is a talented, quirky dude with unique and compelling sensibilities. What I wasn't expecting, Daulton, was that one of the main cast members was Tito Lariva of Tito and Tarantula, also known as one of my favorite bands ever.
Yeah, I had no idea who, like, he was really, and, like, I didn't know that he was in this movie, really. Like, I'd seen it, but I didn't, know who he was. And I'm very pleasantly surprised that someone you're a huge fan of was in this film.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because here's what happened. He pops up, I'm like, wait. He's shoulder-length hair. Texican. And an unwavering sense of charisma despite the fact that he's not an actor. Holy shit, it's Tito! And followed by a side hug by Daulton there, who was so excited that he leapt up to his keister and caused the mic to shake a little bit.
Whoopsie-doo.
But yeah, I'm sorry, I'm back to just giddiness here because for those who are unaware of the singer and the musician that I speak of, Tito and Tarantula is a hard rock / blues rock band from LA whose primary band members are Mexican-born Texas or LA natives, and they are the band who serve as the house band for the Bar the Titty Twister from Dusk Till Dawn. And they most famously performed the song After Dark for when Salma Hayek totally doesn't appear as a vampire. You fun killer.
Yeah, there's a whole behind-the-scene thing about that. But yeah, I guess we'll pass over to Erin to get her thoughts on the film overall.
I will gush about Tito later, trust me. Have this fun killer.
I am the fun killer. It's what I do for a living. No, I'm kidding.
Fuck you.
You're welcome.
She's working on getting the business cards that say Fun Killer.
Yeah. I have a Vistaprint account. No. I mean, I do have Vistaprint, but that's for other reasons. Anyway, so this movie was a slow burn for me. At the beginning of the movie, I was like, this is interesting. I'm not sure if I can totally get into it, but about halfway through, I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of fun. Because some of the characters who at the beginning I thought were kind of annoying ended up being fun. Like, I like John Goodman's character. I mean, who doesn't like John Goodman?
Yeah.
At first, the character, the woman whose name I can't remember, who was like the pathological liar.
Yeah.
At first,
she's
I thought
great.
she was kind of annoying, but then I was like, this lady's actually pretty funny with the shit she makes up. The lady who gets out of bed, I just thought her kind of obnoxious until the end of the movie. Because I was just like, oh god, she's so rich, she's so lazy, she doesn't want to get out of bed. And then I thought about the logistics of that, and I'm like, ew. But the music is fantastic. I mean, you can't go wrong with the Talking Heads. Any incidental music is also great. Even though it's just meant to be like background music for driving scenes or stuff like that,
Or the mall.
is a lot of fun. It creates great ambience for the film. David Byrne's acting.
So, by the way, the reason you couldn't remember that woman's name is because she's literally credited as the lying woman.
Oh.
And, the rich lazy lady is called Miss Rawlings, the lazy woman. That is what she's credited as, so, yeah.
Okay, and I'm, yeah.
It happens.
Yeah. This mic is so weird.
It's okay. I'll cut that out.
Anyway.
Or not.
Or not.
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll fix it in post. I'm holding it together.
Yep.
Richie's giving me a look right now. I wish we had a camera.
You're fine.
Yeah. So, yeah.
But yeah, by the end of the movie, it was like, okay, this is a lot of fun. One thing I will say is, as it's mentioned on the back, there is some scene of voodoo. Not really a spoiler. It's mentioned on the back of the box. And I was actually very impressed by how accurate the voodoo was in that. I'm not an expert in that by any chance, but I remember doing some reading and watching videos and that kind of thing regarding hoodoo and voodoo. And I was like, huh. They actually put research into this for once.
Yeah, it's not the...
And even if it turns out to not be the most accurate thing ever, it's treated very respectfully.
Yeah, you're not like seeing anyone kill a chicken or anything.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things that's clearly meant to subvert the whole idea of the Hollywood low-key racist voodoo.
Yeah.
So...
Season 3, let's not get started.
Yeah. But it's framed at first as something a bit typical set design wise of Hollywood voodoo, but then it's just like a blessing basically.
Yeah, and
the whole spell.
The more you look at like it, the goofier it becomes, you know, like because it's all over the place. There's like a tiny little sugar skull. If you look, there's like a toilet bowl cleaner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still convinced that was a weird bird feather, but that's my take. Because it didn't look too much like a toilet bowl cleaner. It looked like someone like skinned a feather.
And I really like I like how he's got the altar of photos from people who've come to him for help. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, yeah.
I also dug the random Silk Elvis.
And the random TV that's just always showing a picture of the Virgin Mary.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyone who was nervous about another instance of borderline racist Hollywood voodoo, don't worry, Thought Slime and/or Oathbreaker, you guys are fine. You'll be safe if you watch this movie.
Yeah, and no, it's really it's just this movie is like vibe central. It's just like a vibing out movie. Yeah, it's a vibing out movie. The score is phenomenal. David Byrne is a big part of the movie, but he still takes a backseat. You know, he's the out of towner. You know, he's visiting Virgil, Texas. He's like the narrator, basically.
He kind of reminded me of sort of character convention that the stranger from The Big Lebowski satirized.
Yeah,
the Sam Elliott cowboy who just comes in and talks about the plot at varying points.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a much less, tongue-in-cheek execution of it and more earnest.
Yeah, I also do like how the movie pokes fun at like film conventions in certain ways too. Every time they're doing the driving screen, it's obvious, like they're driving shots where it's in the car with David Byrne. It's obvious backdrops, and David Byrne is doing like the Hollywood driving thing where you're just
Yeah.
moving your arms. There's literally a scene where the steering wheel is just loose and he's moving it up and down all over. And he's like, smooth driving.
On a freeway.
Yeah.
And I also really like his acting and delivery here. I'm not sure how well he would have done in other stuff had he not been at the helm like he was,
Yeah.
but there was something very cheeky, playful, and borderline, as I said to Erin during screening, Gene Wilder-esque about his irreverence and his jovial half-grins.
Yeah, it feels very heartfelt in like a off-kilter way.
Like I said, it's playful. It's very impish.
Yes.
Yeah, as Richie mentioned, you made the comparison of Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka, and yeah, I can see that where he's like I don't want to use the term childish because that's not David Byrne at all.
Yeah.
No. But like that feeling that he's like the outsider, he has like a little bit of a sense of wonder about him.
Yeah.
And just the way he delivers his lines feels very like Gene Wilder and Willy Wonka.
The and just like little funny little quirks of the film, how every character says specialness instead of specialness, and they put an emphasis on the ness part.
Yeah. There's a bit of upswing to the way he says specialness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it never gets old, honestly.
No.
Like, anytime he's on screen, I just can't help but smile like an idiot.
Yeah, you could tell he's enjoying his work, but not in like a in-your-face kind of way. You can tell it's David Byrne being like, yeah, I'm having fun making this movie.
Just low-key, too.
Yeah, like David Byrne. David Byrne's a very weirdly low-key guy, despite all of his quirks and eccentricities, you know?
And speaking of actors just stealing the show when they show up, and musicians stealing the show, I gotta talk about Tito for a bit.
Ah, yes.
Tito La Diva.
Ramon the Psychic.
Yep. The guy who claims he can
Feel the waves in everyone. The radio, everyone's got their own waves and vibrations.
The man just oozes the sort of charisma of a party crasher.
Oh, yeah.
Like he comes in, he's got that devilish grin, and once his musical numbers start, he's on top of it. Which culminates in something that I will mark for spoilers eventually. But before we get to that section of it, I just want to say how surprised I was by Tito's appearance in this, because for those not in the know, Tito and Tarantula's main output of music is basically like if Santana and the Foo Fighters had a baby, I guess. Like, it's Chicano music. You know,
Yeah.
very Tex-Mex, very stoner metal.
Yeah.
Very, very bluesy in a very heavy, sludgy way.
Okay.
Most of you, well, the two of you have heard me play the soundtrack to Rebel Galaxy over and over again.
Yeah.
For when we play D&D and stuff.
Yeah.
It's very much in that vein of blues rock.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Blues rock with a lot of Spanish lyrics sprinkled in and Santana-esque improvisations.
Okay.
Which really surprised me because in this movie he does the aforementioned mariachi and lighter end of Latin rock music. Like, this isn't Tito and Tarantula music. It's like Tito Puente or the Gypsy Kings.
Yeah. And, speaking of, like, stealing the show, John Ingalls, who a lot of people probably know from General Hospital, he was on that for forever,
Yep.
steals the show in his scene as the preacher.
Yeah.
He like, perfectly captures, just, like, the weird backtown, just, like, lunatic preachers that are just, like, massive conspiracy theorists and stuff. And that whole musical gospel number there is like so much fun.
So good. And he channels the sort of energy that self-admitted Pentecostal preacher Sam Kinison would eventually channel into his stand-up routines. That sort of fire and brimstone, no indoor voice delivery.
It's so good.
It's so good.
Yeah, I was gonna say about the scene where he plays the preacher. I was like, what is going on? And that, because I'm just like, what is this sermon supposed to be? Oh, it's just supposed to be insane nonsense. I get it now.
Yeah.
Imagine if Alex Jones were a clergyman, essentially.
That's basically what that is.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
It perfectly captures, and it perfectly captures, all those big, like, God, trying to forget the televangelists of like the era. It really captures the tone of that era.
Oh yeah, especially 80s, 90s televangelists. You look at, even televangelists today. You look at a lot of them, and you're just like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
Have you read the Bible? What the fuck is going on here?
It's like the gospel equivalent of There Are Four Lights.
Yeah, and it's fun. This movie, I even appreciate how there's clearly a bit of David Byrne nodding and winking at the camera of like, hey, this is what inspired this movie, of like the two dudes hanging out in the mall looking at tabloids and just like dying over how ridiculous and stupid they are, of like laughter. And you even see David Byrne look at them and just kind of do like a little grin before he just turns back to the camera.
I felt personally attacked by that laugh. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that audio mirror. That's my guffaw. Damn it.
But yeah, no, this movie's got like a weird, irreverent, but like reverent tone. It is somehow both irreverent and reverent.
It's warm.
It's mid-reverent.
Yeah.
Mid-reverend.
I made up that word.
it
Copyright
both-
2022.
It both mocks and celebrates small-town American life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as someone who grew up in who spent a lot of time growing up in like small town middle of nowhere area, Western Pennsylvania, High Brittany. Anyway, it does very much capture that feeling of like almost a nostalgic feel of being in that kind of like small town area. Everyone knows everybody, but not like showing the worst aspects of growing up in a small town.
Everyone knows everyone's business,
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like it's gonna show like the absolute worst aspects of it, which I'm glad it didn't, because it's like, oh yeah, you don't want to hear about the meth lab down the
Yeah,
street.
it would feel out of place.
It would feel out of place.
This one's very warm and
It's warm and
genial.
fuzzy.
Like, John Goodman's character, as alluded to before, goes through a character arc where he's looking for love.
Yeah, and he learns to love himself, like, which is the big culmination.
And I was surprised by just how, like, supportive everyone in this movie was.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
No one is, like, malicious or mean to each other in this film.
Which
No one says, bless your heart.
Yeah.
which I was kind of expecting to a degree, because David Byrne has some off-kilter gallows humor sensibilities in his songs for the Talking Heads.
Yeah, I mean, look at life during wartime,
Yeah, I was expecting something a lot more dark, but I was pleasantly surprised. Not that that wouldn't have been a good time in a morbid sense, but I'm glad that we got something a bit lighter, especially after Erin twisted my heart like a kitten with a ball of yarn with her pick.
You're welcome.
And going
That grin.
back to like what we mentioned earlier, I just want to do a special shout out to Ed Lockman. Like, his cinematography on this film,
Oh, yes.
it makes the movie. Like, it captures the beauty, like the natural beauty and even the manufactured beauty of Texas,
Oh, yeah. Like, there are some shots that look like they were taken straight out of a commercial in the best of ways.
Oh, yeah.
Or shots that were taken out of a Western.
Yeah. And Lockman just like has this eye for the natural beauty of the world, you can tell, and that everyone clearly loves looking at it, because this actually was entirely shot and filmed in Texas during the concept and filming stages of the movie during production. Like many movies during production, it actually had a completely different title during production, which at first you're like, huh, that's a weird title, but then it makes sense in a way.
What was it?
So the production title of this film was Wild Infancy.
Huh. I'm not sure which one I like better, but that's a pretty good title.
It is, and it makes sense because there's many references to the word wild in this movie. Like, the word wild gets tossed around a lot.
Such as a wonderful performance of...
You talking about the Wild Wild Life scene?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that is the first straight-up musical number in the movie. And it's clearly made to, like, ease you into the film and make you go, okay, this is, talking heads are here, but they're not on the front ground, okay?
And this, at the 40-20 mark, is where I'm going to cap it off for spoilers, because there are going to be some discussions of some of the later musical numbers, which I all want you to be surprised by.
Yeah. So please come back after this, if you don't want spoilers.
Alright, so, obviously that was the perfect opening number.
Yes.
The music video number, as we have alluded to, is, idiosyncrasy.
It's okay, but, like, it's a much lower step in quality from the rest of the film.
But worry not, because it gets so much better at the culmination, the amazing talent show sequence, most of which have varying degrees of choreographed covers of Talking Heads songs.
Yeah, and of course the two big standout features at the end, which are the number Radiohead, performed by Tito.
Yes.
And then, of course, the big show-stopping musical number, the culmination of the plot that's been alluded to throughout the film. John Goodman looking for love. His character is just, is seeking it. He literally makes a commercial and has a sign outside of his house saying "Wife Wanted."
He used...
Which in any other context would be the creepiest thing ever.
He used one of those old video dating services from the 80s and 90s, which, for those who don't know about those, and are wondering how I know about them, I read too much. Anyway,
Okay.
They were essentially like, you could just put yourself...
It's essentially a dating profile, only you would put it on TV and,
Yeah.
like, sitting and be like, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm like.
Whose Line Is It Anyway probably did the most famous parodies of those.
Oh, absolutely. Whose Line always did the hilarious parodies of, like, the dating profile kind of thing. So, for the people who are younger and watching this and don't know what a dating profile is, we just explained it.
You know a serenity that we will never be familiar with. Anyway.
You didn't use Tinder. I'm kidding.
Yeah, what are you talking about? That's still popular.
Back in my day, we didn't even have those Tinders.
Back in my day, Tinder was something you throw on the fire.
But yeah, the movie clearly appreciates its sets and its design and its setting. Like, the film is entirely filmed in Texas as well. Every single part of that movie was Texas.
Yeah, and it shows in the set design and the costumes and the choreography going on at the talent show. That Radiohead number, by the way, is so good.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Because, as expected from the frontman of Tito and Tarantula, he gives the Talking Heads classic a awesome mariachi spin.
Well, everything in this movie was created for the movie. Every piece of music was original for this film. Yeah. So, like, that wasn't even a cover. That was just straight up a song created for the film.
And I love how it threads that genre needle so well. It's a little bit Talking Heads, and it's a little bit of Tito and Tarantula style Latin rock and roll.
Yeah, every number that isn't just performed by the Talking Heads itself, you can see, like, how everyone's thrown themselves into the song a bit.
You've got, for instance, even before the talent show sequence, which trust
me, that plays at like the bar at the beginning.
Wild Wild Life.
Wild Wild Life.
and You've got the John Ingle Preacher's whole gospel number.
Yeah, Puzzle in Evidence.
Yes. And I'd say that other than the Radiohead number, my second favorite one would have to be the one that Pop Staples has during sorry, train of thought. But he gets some singing in during the voodoo stuff and other scenes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's a gospel legend Pop Staples.
Yeah, his number's very cool. It's a very, like... It feels very ritualistic, but
Yes.
also bluesy in a really cool way.
Oh, yeah.
Folksy.
Folksy, yeah, that's a good way
Folksy's
to
the
put
right
it.
word to use.
Yeah.
Bluesy's good too.
Yeah, like
Uh,
folksy, bluesy sort of deal. You know, it's really cool. It's a vibing song. And of course, the big show-stopping number at the end is John Goodman's "People Like Us" song, which, you know, your classic country number, and he kills it.
He does kill it. Like, I never had heard John Goodman sing before, and then I was actually really impressed by this. I didn't know he had a singing voice like that. I didn't know he had a singing voice, period.
So kind of like Hanks Williams-ish about
Yeah.
his cadence.
Yeah.
Like, he'll sing sometimes for Disney movies and
Oh, yeah.
anywhere where he does like voice work for kids' movies.
Mhm.
He sung fairly well, for instance, on Unfortunately the Jungle Book 2.
Oh, right.
He got some musical
Yeah.
numbers on that. Erin looks utterly puzzled right now.
I forgot that movie existed for one, and two, I didn't really care when it came out, so...
Yeah,
It
fair.
got a theatrical release, people.
Really?
Really? I thought it
Wasn't
direct to
direct to DVD?
No,
Whoa.
Jungle Book 2 was the exception.
That's so weird, because almost every Disney sequel has been direct to DVD, with the only other...
Jungle
yeah.
Book 2 was the exception.
Yeah,
It
the-
got the theatrical release, and I regret...
Aside from that, all I can think of is the Pixar movies and Frozen 2, and nobody saw Frozen 2.
Oh, and The Rescuers Down Under.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good movie, though.
That is a good
Yeah.
movie.
I am embarrassed to have say I am one of 10 people who saw Jungle Book 2 in theaters.
Really? All right.
I had a very Disney-centric childhood,
So
okay?
did I.
Fair enough.
I had a bunch of Beauty and the Beast sequels on VHS tape, and yeah, none of them were good.
Yeah, I feel like I saw like a weird assortment of movies as kids. I feel like as kids I saw more of DreamWorks output than I did in Pixar's.
I
Than
was
I
all
did
over the
Disney.
place, but Disney ruled the roost. But I'm glad to finally have seen a movie where John Goodman sings, and I can say the rest of the movie surrounding it was good, because Blues Brothers 2000 also sucked ass, but any number he had in that, where he got to do, say, Ghost Riders in the Sky, was fantastic.
Yeah, usually we don't talk about the Blues Brothers sequel, because, you know, it's that bad, but this is the exception, because John Goodman is singing in it, and it's actually very good.
And weirdly enough, I hear the licensed game is pretty good, which is like the craziest thing ever. One, the fact that there was a Blues Brothers 2000 licensed game, and two, that it was pretty good.
Huh.
I'm confused
Yeah.
by everything.
It was an N64 game.
This is making my head hurt.
I just scratched my head.
I mean, it's no Gex, but
Oh my god.
Here we go. Okay, alright, we need to get out of the spoilers for just a second and talk about this man's troubling Gex infatuation, because it is pervasive. It makes it into our tabletop games. It has made it at least once into our podcast right now. Twice. And, like, and this guy is conscientious of it. He's giggling his backside off right now.
hey, Square Enix, please bring back Gex. I saw you renewed the trademark, so I imagine you have something planned. We want a remaster or a full-fledged game. Come on, bring Billy West back to do it. I'm sure he wants to play Gex.
That wasn't Billy West.
It wasn't one game.
Oh. One of the later ones, I think. Because they had a different
yeah.
comedian voice in the first couple.
Yeah.
That's Snow?
How is it snow? Okay.
For behind the scenes perspective, snow has fallen on the set of Killer Score, but we are still here.
Weird when you're talking about a movie set in Texas.
And also that it's March 27th.
Troubling.
Lousy Smarch weather.
But getting past Daulton's troubling mental trains, we are returning back to John Goodman's absolutely awesome performance.
It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous. His singing voice is just very good.
Heartfelt, a lot of energy, a lot of character.
And I also like that he did a little bit of the song earlier in the movie, but it was very, very rough and just random interjections of like meow.
Yeah, like he was literally like, haven't figured this verse out. You know?
Yeah, and it is a wonderful little glimpse at that aforementioned character arc that Daulton mentioned.
And the character building, you know.
Because when he sings the first draft,
It's sad. It's a very sad sounding song.
It's lamenting his condition, about how he's not very conventionally attractive, and
he just wants someone to love, you know.
But then when he's brought out to the show and his buddy gives him that whole voodoo ritual,
that looked like Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah.
he gets up
God,
on
that number's good too. The voodoo number's good.
Oh yeah.
It's like I said, Pop's newest stuff.
Oh yeah.
He was the leader of the Staple Singers for a reason.
He was vibing.
And he gets up on stage and delivers a more triumphant country.
This is who I am.
Yeah, it goes from like lamenting one's position to being like, this is me.
It sounds like, funny enough, calling back to one of our previous Musical Month episodes, the sorts of numbers that Walk Hard parodied through Dewey Cox's first singles.
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
But, like, it's just so earnest and
heartfelt, yeah.
And awesome, too. Like, this is something you strut to.
Yeah. It, like, literally, like, it changes everyone's perception of them. Like, you can see it in their faces.
Yeah, you cannot... as Daulton said, you can see it in their faces, and you can see, like, the women whispering to each other in the audience, like, starting to become infatuated with him, which is something I expected.
It's adorable, you know?
It really is.
And I just love, like, Lewis's character arc in this film, you know?
Oh, yeah.
He's such a lovable guy, and you feel for him, like, right out of the gate, you see him talking, and you're like, this guy, you just want to give him a hug.
Perfect casting for John Goodman, because that man just oozes geniality. Like, I remember watching 10 Cloverfield Lane and being...
I was about to mention that.
Yeah, and then just being like, whoa, John Goodman could be, like, horrifying? What?
Like, I mean, great actor, but I had this impulse in my mind. I'm like, no, I don't want to be scared of you, John Goodman.
Everyone, like, for years, many Americans growing up in the 90s, we've had this image of John Goodman as, like, a lovable blue-collar dad because of his work on Roseanne.
Roseanne and his work as really genial animated characters like Sully and Pacha.
Yeah, no, like, but he nails, like, his performance in this film. It's one of his earlier roles. This was, like, right before Raising Arizona. And, he just kills it. Everyone is just so good in this. It's such a heartfelt, charming little slice of life film.
Yeah, and like I said, I know I've harped on it over and over, but the Tito casting was...
so good. It's genius. Like, they put a bunch of people in this film who had experience with music, and it shows.
Yeah, and it seems, looking back at the filmography of folks like Pop Staples and Tito La Riva, they are in that class of musicians that has done some acting on the side.
Yeah. And this movie really captures just, like, not, like, the soul of, like, America in a lot of ways, weirdly enough.
It feels Americana.
It does. And the film, like, bookends itself excellently. You know, it opens and closes with a shot that are, like, perfect mirrors of each other.
Of a girl walking down the empty road.
walking down like a dirt road, and like when the film starts, we see her walking towards the camera during the sunrise, and during the ending we see her walking away from the camera during the sunset.
Great Kuleshov effects there, honestly.
Yeah, because like you can see in the beginning of the movie, like it's a little girl, and she's just like walking like heel to toe, just like playing around on a dirt road, and then you see it at the end. I'm like, okay, that's cute, because that's something I remember doing when I was that age, growing up around there, was just like playing on dirt roads, and just that kind of thing. It felt very nostalgic for me.
Yeah. So overall, I think we're good to get out of spoiler territories now, and
At
just
the 55 mark.
yeah, and then just come out of the gate and wrap this baby up on final thoughts and stuff. So I'll take it last since it was my film. Yeah, final thoughts from Richie and then Erin, I guess.
There's been a lot of candidates for best movie you've ever picked for the podcast so far. This one took the cake slowly but surely. I love the music, I love the atmosphere, I love the cinematography and choreography, and I just love that feeling of satisfaction knowing that I have this in my cinematic lexicon now.
Yeah, it's an obscure film to be sure, but like it has a way of worming its way into your heart and soul.
And shout out to both my mom and dad for getting me on the path of loving Talking Heads. I love you guys.
So I enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was actually pretty cute too. Not in a condescending way, of course not.
No, it's a very cute movie.
It's a very cute movie. I like the message that it puts out and not shoving it in your face.
Yeah.
Like a lot of movies that have any type of message do.
Yeah, it's that you're gonna be at your happiest if you like just stick to what makes you you and you celebrate that.
Yeah. And I would say my closing thoughts on this would be love the music. Music's fantastic. Shot composition is chef's kiss.
Oh god, it's so good.
Oh, great. So good.
Yeah. And overall, it may be a little bit, at the beginning, maybe a little bit hard to get through. I don't want to say hard to get through. It's a slow burn, because at the beginning I thought it was like, okay, this is interesting, but where is it going? But just push through by, like, the, 20-minute mark, you'll fall in love with it.
Yeah, I guarantee you by the time you reach the club scene and the Wild Wild Life number comes in, you'll go like, okay, I get it now.
So, this is going to be a strange couple of weeks for us here at Killer Score because we have some stuff coming up on our end. Although, announcement for two of our hosts who may be making an appearance in the interim of April.
So, anyone who's a fan of our show, feel free to bump into Erin and I next April. We will be at PAX East. My younger brother won a pass, so we're essentially going to be like escorting him there, and having a bit of fun. Probably shoot a bit of video footage for PAX and stuff. Obviously, we don't have like panels or anything, but we'll if you're a fan of our stuff, we'll post we'll actually post a little thing where you can find us when we're there on our Twitter page if you want to like come to a meet up, like fan hangout thing.
Yeah. And also, I could possibly, if you are okay with it, bring my camera and just shooting some random videos while we're there.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. So if you want to like come up and meet two of the three members of Killer Score in person, ask us about our thoughts on movies or music and stuff, or just chat in general, love to have that. Love meeting people.
The event, unfortunately, will be a Richie-less one because your old pal's gotta go to Seattle for his own ends. He's got to go see his brother get married and possibly even officiate. Oh. And shout out to Chris and Sabina if you're listening to this. I love you both dearly, and honestly, I should thank you for the vacation I'm taking from production.
So yeah, we'll have one episode out for you in April. Don't know when, but we'll figure it out. And my final thoughts on the film are that I love it even more than I did the first time. It's a very interesting little series of vignettes showing life in the small town of Virgil, Texas that just oozes charm and heartfelt nature, and yeah, check it out. But to close this out, I believe we are back to Richie. So you got something in mind for us next time?
I do. And while we are building up to theme month coming up in May that I do not want to disclose just yet, I think
surprise!
I think I've got a good little way to thread the needle between this and the next theme month we have.
All right.
Okay.
This movie's got hitmen.
Ooh.
It's got hip-hop music by the RZA.
Ooh.
And it's got a weird relationship with the concept of thematic subtlety, but it's everything I love about Jim Jarmusch mixed with everything you love about hood movies. Tune in for the runner-up of the old Twitter poll for the Season 3 premiere as I take Daulton and Erin through the weird yet exciting world of Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai.
All right. See you guys next time.
Yep.